The storm came early that December, the kind that turns mountains into tombs. Ethan Cole wasn't looking for anyone to save. He'd stopped believing in miracles 8 years ago, the day the avalanche took his wife and left him with a 10-year-old daughter in a cabin that creaked with loneliness. He worked his ranger shifts, heated up canned soup for dinner, and told himself that surviving was enough. But when he found her collapsed in the snow, designer clothes hidden under ice, a stranger with no ID, and a Patek Philippe watch worth more than his truck, he did what he always did. He carried her home. What Ethan didn't know was that the woman freezing to death on his mountain was Isabella Moore, the billionaire CEO whose company had destroyed his town, whose decisions had cost 200 people their jobs, whose signature had ended his wife's career months before the avalanche. And what Isabella didn't know was that the man saving her life was the one person in the world who had every reason to let her die. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're ready for a tale of second chances, redemption, and what it really means to be rich, hit that like button and let's begin. A single dad saved a stranger in the mountains. She turned out to be a billionaire. The coffee was bitter the way Ethan Cole liked it. No sugar to soften the edges, no cream to make it kind. He stood at the kitchen window of the cabin, watching steam rise from the mug and disappear into the cold air that leaked through the frame he'd been meaning to fix for 3 years. Outside, Pine Ridge was still sleeping. The town, if you could still call 400 people a town, lay scattered across the valley below wood smoke, rising from chimneys into a sky the color of old bruises. December in the Rockies meant the sun came late and left early, and Ethan had learned to live in that narrow band of light the way he'd learned to live in everything else, expecting nothing, asking for less. Dad, he turned. Lily stood in the doorway of her room wearing the flannel pajamas that were getting too short in the sleeves, her dark hair. Sarah's hair tangled from sleep. 10 years old and already wearing that look, the one that said she was taking inventory, making sure he was okay, making sure the world hadn't shifted while she slept. Morning bug, he said. You're up early. Shift starts at 7. She padded across the floor in wool socks, the boards creaking under her feet, the way they'd creaked under his wife's feet, under his own feet, under the weight of 8 years of living in a house that had been built for happiness and had settled into something smaller. Lily climbed onto the stool by the counter and watched him crack eggs into a pan. Is it going to snow? She asked. Radio says maybe tonight. Big storm. Could be. She was quiet for a moment, the way she got when she was thinking about something she didn't want to say. Ethan had learned to wait. Pushing Lily was like pushing water. It just found another way around. Amy's mom said they might move, Lily said finally, to Denver. Ethan flipped the eggs. Yeah. Amy said there's nothing here, no jobs, nothing to do. That's what people say. Is she right? He looked at his daughter. She was 10, but she'd been 9 when she started asking questions like that, and 8 when she'd stopped being a child in the ways that mattered. When your mother dies in an avalanche and your father spends a year moving through the house like a ghost, you grow up fast. You learn to read silences. You learn that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you need protecting too. There's still the mountains, Ethan said. Still the forest. And you can't eat mountains. He smiled despite himself. No, you can't. He plated the eggs, added toast from bread that was a day from stale, set it in front of her. Lily ate the way she did everything carefully, methodically, making sure nothing was wasted. She'd learned that from him too, he supposed. The careful rationing of everything, food, words, hope. I'm doing a patrol today, he said, checking the northern trails before the storm. Want me to come? School. It's Saturday. He paused. Saturdays used to mean something. Pancakes maybe, a hike. Sarah would pack sandwiches and they'd eat them on flat rocks while Lily chased chipmunks. But that was before, and before was a country Ethan didn't visit anymore. Next time, he said. Lily nodded, but her eyes said she'd heard that before. The ranger station was a shed with delusions of grandeur. 2 desks, a radio that worked when it felt like it, a coffee maker that produced something resembling motor oil. Ethan's boss, Jim Hernandez, was 62 and counting the days until retirement the way a prisoner counts days until parole. Storm's coming in fast, Jim said, not looking up from his newspaper. NWS says 18 inches by midnight. I'll check the high trails, Ethan said. Make sure no one's up there. Season's over. Tourists are gone. just in case. Jim folded the paper and looked at him over his reading glasses. You know the trails are empty, Cole. You just like being out there. Ethan didn't argue because Jim was right. The mountains didn't ask questions. They didn't look at you with concern or pity or that careful distance people used when they didn't know what to say to a widower. The mountains just were ancient, indifferent, honest in their cruelty. I'll be back by 3, Ethan said. Take the radio. Always do. He loaded his pack, first aid kit, emergency blanket, flares, water energy bars that tasted like sawdust and kept you alive anyway. The truck started on the third try, coughing exhaust into air that was already thick with the promise of snow. He drove through town past the boarded-up storefronts and the houses with for sale signs that had been up so long the paint was flaking. Pine Ridge was dying. It had been dying since 2018, since Moore Hospitality Group had closed the Whispering Pines Resort and taken 200 jobs with it. The town had been built on tourism hikers and summer skiers, in winter families year-round looking for that mountain experience. The resort had been the heart of it, and when the heart stopped, everything else started shutting down. Sarah had worked there, head housekeeper, proud of the promotion, talking about benefits, and maybe saving enough for Lily's college. And then one day in November, corporate sent an email. Restructuring. That's what they called it. 200 people restructured right out of their livelihoods. Sarah had taken it hard, started applying everywhere Aspenvale, Breckenridge, got an interview in Summit County, 100 miles of mountain roads in January. Ethan had told her to wait, the pass was dangerous, the weather was turning. But Sarah was stubborn and proud and scared in a way she didn't know how to say. The avalanche had been quick, at least. That's what the highway patrol told him. She wouldn't have suffered. Ethan still wondered if that was true or just something people said to help the living sleep at night. The trailhead was empty, the parking lot a sheet of ice, with his truck the only thing breaking the white. Ethan shouldered his pack and started walking. The trail climbed through pine forest, switchbacking up the mountainside, and with each step the world got quieter. Snow, muffled sound up here, turned the forest into a cathedral of silence. He'd been walking for an hour when he felt that change in the air that came before serious weather. The temperature dropping fast, the wind picking up, carrying the smell of snow, the way desert wind carries dust. He checked his watch. 1:30. He should turn back. But something made him keep going. Not instinct exactly, more like the pull of habit, the ranger training that said you check everything twice, you leave no stone unturned, you make sure. The trail crested a ridge and the valley opened up below. This was where the old resort had been, Whispering Pines they'd called it, a name that sounded like a promise in brochures. Now it was just empty buildings with broken windows, a parking lot full of weeds, a chairlift frozen mid-arc like a monument to optimism. Ethan looked away. He didn't come up here to remember. That's when he saw the tire tracks. Fresh. Recent enough that snow hadn't filled them completely. They led off the main road onto a service track that wound higher into the mountains toward the ridge-line trails that weren't maintained anymore, that shouldn't have had anyone on them, especially not with a storm coming. Damn it, Ethan said to the empty air. He followed the tracks. They were erratic, swerving the pattern of someone who didn't know the road or was driving too fast or both. 100 yards in, he found where the vehicle had left the track entirely. Deep gouges in the earth-torn brush, and then the cliff. Ethan approached carefully, knowing what he'd find before he found it. At the bottom of the ravine, maybe 60 feet down, was a silver SUV. Rental plates. The driver's door was open, hanging at an angle. No smoke, no fire, but the windshield was spider-webbed with impact. Hell, Ethan breathed. He keyed his radio. Jim, you copy? Static. He tried again. Nothing. The mountains played hell with signals sometimes, and the storm wasn't helping. Ethan looked down at the wreck, calculating. 60 feet. Steep but climbable. If someone was alive down there, they wouldn't be alive for long. Not with the temperature dropping and the storm coming. The smart thing would be to hike back, get help, come back with a team. But smart assumed time and time was something the injured didn't have. Ethan started down. The descent was treacherous, all loose scree, an exposed root, his boots fighting for purchase on earth that wanted to slide. He went slow, testing each step using saplings as handholds. Twice he slipped, caught himself, kept going. His breath came hard clouds of it, dissipating into air that was getting colder by the minute. At the bottom, he approached the SUV carefully. The vehicle had taken the impact on the passenger side, the metal crumpled like paper. The driver's side was relatively intact, the door open like someone had tried to get out. And there, 20 feet from the vehicle, was the body. No, not a body. A person. A woman collapsed in the snow, wearing jeans and a dark jacket that was expensive looking, even covered in mud and pine needles. Her hair was dark, streaked with gray, matted with blood from a gash on her forehead. Her face was pale, her lips blue. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her, pulling off his glove to check for a pulse. For a long moment he felt nothing, and then there. Faint, irregular, but there. "Can you hear me?" he said. No response. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. Ethan did a quick assessment the way his training had taught him. No obvious broken bones in the limbs, but that didn't mean there wasn't internal bleeding. Spinal damage, a dozen things that could kill her before help arrived. He pulled the emergency blanket from his pack, wrapped her in it. She was small, maybe 5'6", couldn't have weighed more than 130. Light enough to carry if he was careful. As he lifted her, something caught the light. Her wrist. A watch. No, not just a watch. Ethan had seen enough hunting magazines, enough ads in the back of men's journals to recognize it, Patek Philippe, when he saw one. The thing on her wrist cost more than his truck, more than his cabin, maybe more than everything he owned put together. He looked down at the woman in his arms. Designer jeans now that he was paying attention. A jacket that was North Face, but not the kind you bought at REI, the kind you bought in boutiques in places like Aspen or Jackson Hole. No wedding ring, but her nails were manicured, or had been before the crash. This was not a lost hiker. This was not some tourist who'd taken a wrong turn. This was someone running from something, or to something. Someone who had no business being on an unmaintained mountain road in December with a storm coming in. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, she was just someone dying in the snow, and Ethan was the only thing between her and the cold. He started climbing. The ascent was harder, much harder. Every step was a negotiation with gravity, with the weight in his arms, with his own body that was 46 years old and felt every one of them. His shoulders burned, his thighs shook, sweat ran down his back despite the cold, and he could feel his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to get out. Halfway up, he had to stop. He set her down as gently as he could, braced against a boulder, and caught his breath. The woman's head lolled against his chest. He could feel her breathing, still shallow, still there. "Stay with me," he said, though he didn't know if she could hear. "Just stay with me." He picked her up again and kept climbing. When he finally reached the top, hauling both of them over the lip of the ravine, Ethan collapsed onto his back, the woman still in his arms, both of them breathing hard. The sky had gone dark, that premature twilight that came with storm clouds. Snow had started to fall, fat flakes that landed on his face and melted with his sweat. He gave himself 30 seconds. Then he got up. The truck was a quarter-mile away. He walked it step after step, the woman's weight settling into his bones. By the time he reached the vehicle, the snow was falling in earnest, the wind picking up, visibility dropping fast. Ethan laid her across the back seat, covered her with the emergency blanket and his own jacket. He turned the heat up as high as it would go and pointed the truck toward home. The drive back was white-knuckle. The road disappeared under snow, the center line invisible, the edges a guess. Ethan drove by memory and faith, his hands locked on the wheel, checking the rear view every 30 seconds to make sure the woman was still breathing. In the mirror, he could see her face slack and pale. She looked older than he'd thought at first, early 40s maybe. Lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind that came from squinting at screens or smiling at people you didn't like. There was something about her face, even unconscious, even half-frozen, a hardness, or maybe just exhaustion. The look of someone who'd been tired for a very long time. "Who are you?" Ethan said to the rearview mirror. The woman didn't answer. By the time he pulled up to the cabin, it was full dark and the storm was howling. Ethan killed the engine, ran around to the back door, and lifted her out. The cabin door opened before he reached it. "Dad!" Lily stood there, backlit by the fireplace, her eyes going wide. "What?" "Call 911, Ethan said, pushing past her. "Tell them we need an ambulance." "Dad, the roads. Just do it." He carried the woman to the couch, laid her down, started checking vitals again. Pulse still there, breathing, still shallow. The gash on her head had stopped bleeding, but needed stitches. Possible concussion, possible hypothermia, possible internal injuries he couldn't see. Lily ran to the phone, picked it up, put it down. It's dead. The storm must have knocked out the lines. Cell chom. No signal. Ethan looked at the woman on his couch, then at his daughter, then at the windows where snow was already piling against the glass. The storm was supposed to last through tomorrow. 18 inches, Jim had said. Maybe more. The roads would be impassable by morning, which meant he was alone with this. With her. Get the first aid kit, Ethan said. The big one? Lily ran. Ethan knelt beside the couch and started unlacing the woman's boots. They were hiking boots, expensive ones, barely broken in, as if she'd bought them specifically for this trip, as if she'd known she'd be going into the mountains and had gone to some outdoor store and said, "Give me what I need to survive." Except she hadn't survived, not on her own. He got the boots off, checked her feet. No frostbite yet, but close. He grabbed blankets, piled them on, started chafing her hands to encourage circulation. Her fingers were long, elegant, the nails painted a neutral color that was chipped, now broken. Lily came back with the first aid kit. Together they worked the way they'd learned to work over the years, father and daughter, a team of two against whatever the world threw at them. Ethan cleaned the head wound while Lily held the flashlight. He bandaged it, checked the woman's pupils, watched for signs of concussion. Is she going to be okay? Lily asked. I don't know, Bug. Who is she? I don't know that either. They sat there watching the stranger breathe, listening to the storm rage outside. The fire crackled, the cabin creaked, and the woman, whoever she was, lay still and silent, her secrets locked behind closed eyes. It was Lily who noticed it first. Dad, she said quietly. Look. She was pointing at the woman's wrist at the watch that caught the firelight and threw it back like captured stars. Ethan had already seen it. He'd already cataloged it, filed it away in the part of his mind that registered incongruities. A woman dressed for hiking but new to it, a rental car on a closed road, and a watch that cost more than most people made in a year. That's expensive, Lily said. Yeah, like really expensive. Yeah, Lily looked at him with those old eyes, that 10-year-old wisdom that broke his heart at every time he saw it. Dad who drives into a storm with a watch like that, who runs away to the mountains dressed like that. Ethan didn't have an answer. But as he sat there watching the woman's chest rise and fall, watching snow pile against the windows, he had a feeling, the kind that settled in your gut, like bad food, that whatever this woman was running from, it was big enough to die for or kill for. The wind howled, the fire cracked, and somewhere in the depths of unconsciousness, the woman stirred her lips, moving soundlessly, forming words that Ethan couldn't hear but somehow knew weren't prayers. They were warnings. Outside, the storm buried the world in white. Inside, Ethan Cole, who hadn't expected anything in 8 years, realized that expectation was about to change. The woman's eyes flickered beneath closed lids. And in the stillness between one breath and the next, Ethan heard it. A whisper barely there, riding the edge of consciousness. Don't let them find me. The words hung in the air like frost. Don't let them find me. Ethan stared at this woman on his couch, her lips barely moving, the words so faint he might have imagined them. But Lily had heard them too, he could tell by the way her hand tightened on his arm, by the way her breath caught. Dad, Lily whispered, what does she mean? I don't know. Should we go to bed, Bug? But now. His voice came out harder than he meant it to, and Lily flinched. But she was also 10, and 10 meant old enough to know when your father wasn't asking. She looked at the woman one more time, then trudged to her room, glancing back over her shoulder before she closed the door. Ethan waited until he heard the click of the latch. Then he turned back to the stranger. She was unconscious again, or seemed to be. Her breathing had evened out some, her color slightly better than the death pale she'd been when he'd found her. The head wound wasn't bleeding anymore. Her pulse was weak but steady. By all medical accounts, she was stable. But stable didn't explain the watch. Didn't explain the words. Didn't explain why someone would drive into a storm on a closed road and then beg not to be found. Ethan should call for help. Should hike down to town in the morning, get Jim, get the sheriff, get someone with more authority and fewer questions. That was the right thing to do, the legal thing, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she'd looked lying in the snow, small and broken, and alone. Maybe it was the memory of Sarah, who'd also been alone when the mountain took her, when Ethan wasn't there to help. Maybe it was just 8 years of living with guilt and the chance finally to save someone. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he just wanted to know who she was. The night was long. Ethan kept the fire burning, feeding it logs every hour, keeping the cabin temperature just above cold. He checked the woman's vitals every 30 minutes, pulse, breathing, pupil response. He changed the bandage on her head wound twice. He monitored for signs of shock, of internal bleeding, of the dozen things that could go wrong when someone took a 60-foot fall and walked away alive. She didn't wake, but she moved sometimes. Restless, fitful movements. Her hands would clench, her face would tighten, and words would tumble out, fragments, pieces, nothing that made sense. The board won't. Restructuring. I didn't know. Corporate speak, business jargon, the language of conference rooms and quarterly reports. Not the words you'd expect from someone fleeing into the wilderness. Around 3 in the morning, Ethan gave up trying to make sense of it. He made coffee, bitter and black, and sat in the chair by the couch watching the woman sleep and listening to the storm tear at the cabin like it wanted in. Snow was piling 3 feet deep against the windows. The road would be gone by morning, buried under white. They were cut off, the three of them, Ethan, Lily, and this stranger who'd crashed into their lives like an avalanche. He should have been worried, should have been planning, calculating, figuring out how to get help. Instead, he just felt tired. Tired in the way that went deeper than sleep could fix. Tired in the bones and the soul, in that place where hope used to live before it got foreclosed on. When dawn came, it came gray and muted. The storm had settled into a steady fall, the kind that could go on for days. Ethan stood at the window looking at a world erased by white and felt the weight of isolation settle over him like an old coat. Behind him, the woman stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, fighting their way through layers of unconsciousness. They were gray, storm cloud, gray the same color as the dawn, and they moved across the cabin with the careful assessment of someone taking inventory. The ceiling, the walls, the fire, Ethan. She tried to sit up and gasped, her hand going to her ribs. Easy, Ethan said, moving to her side. You've been in an accident. Don't move too fast. She stared at him like he was speaking a language she'd forgotten. Then her hand went to her head, found the bandage, and her eyes widened with something that might have been panic. Where? Her voice was rough, scraped raw. Where am I? My cabin, Pine Ridge, Colorado. You crashed your car in the mountains. I found you. Crashed, she said the word like she was testing it, seeing if it fit. Her eyes darted around the room again, faster now, looking for something. My phone. Where's my phone? In your car, I'd guess, at the bottom of a ravine. She tried to sit up again, and this time Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. You need to stay still. You hit your head pretty hard. Possible concussion. Definitely hypothermia. You're lucky to be alive. She looked at his hand on her shoulder, then at his face, and something in her expression shifted. Calculation, maybe, or recognition that she was trapped here with him, with nowhere to run. How long, she asked. Since the accident, about 12 hours. Did you call anyone? Lines are down, Storm knocked them out. He watched her process this, watched relief flicker across her face so fast he almost missed it. She was glad. Glad no one had been called. Glad she was hidden here in a cabin in the middle of nowhere with a stranger who didn't know her name. What's your name? Ethan asked. She hesitated. It was just a second, just a pause, but it was there. People didn't hesitate when you asked their name. Not unless they were deciding whether to lie. Sarah, she said, and Ethan knew with absolute certainty that it wasn't true. He didn't call her on it. Not yet. Instead, he helped her sit up, propped pillows behind her, brought her water that she drank like someone who'd been wandering the desert. Her hands shook when she held the glass. Shock, probably. Adrenaline crash. The body's response to trauma or fear. You have a name, she asked, setting the glass down. Ethan. Ethan Cole. Thank you, Ethan, for... She gestured vaguely at herself, at the cabin, at the fact of her continued existence. For this, well, don't thank me yet. We're snowed in. Storm's supposed to last through tomorrow, maybe longer. Roads won't be clear for days. He watched for panic, but instead, she just nodded slowly, like this was information she could work with. So I'm stuck here, she said. We all are. My daughter's in the other room. Oh, Another flicker across her face, harder to read this time. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. This must be an imposition. You didn't mean to crash your car in a storm. No, I... She stopped, shook her head carefully. I made some poor decisions. Got turned around. The weather came in faster than I expected. What were you doing up there? That road's been closed since 2018. I didn't know. I was just driving. Just driving? Yes. In December, on a mountain road, in a rental car. She met his eyes, and there was steel there now, under the exhaustion. Is there a point to this interrogation, Mr. Cole? Just trying to understand what happened. What happened is, I made a mistake. You saved my life. End of story. Is it? What else would it be? Ethan thought about the watch on her wrist worth more than his annual income. Thought about designer clothes and manicured nails and the way she'd asked about her phone before asking about her own injuries. Thought about the words she'd whispered in unconsciousness. Don't let them find me. I guess we'll find out, he said. Lily emerged from her room around 8, dressed and cautious, hovering in the doorway like a deer deciding whether to bolt. The woman Sarah she'd said, though Ethan still didn't believe, it tried to smile at her. Hi there, the woman said softly. Lily looked at her father. Ethan nodded, permission granted. Hi, Lily said, venturing closer. Are you okay? I'm better, thanks to your dad. He's good at saving people. Lily said it simply as fact, and Ethan felt something twist in his chest. Not good enough, he thought. Not when it mattered most. What's your name? The woman asked. Lily. That's beautiful. It was my mom's favorite flower. Lily glanced at Ethan. She died. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Lily moved to the kitchen, started pulling out cereal boxes, comfortable now in her own space. Do you want breakfast? We have eggs and bread and... She frowned at the refrigerator. Cheese, that might be okay. The woman laughed, actually laughed, the sound rough but genuine. I don't want to take your food. We have enough, Lily said firmly. Dad says we always have enough. Ethan started making breakfast while Lily set the table, both of them moving in practiced rhythm. The woman watched from the couch, something unreadable in her expression. Ethan couldn't tell if it was longing or pain or just exhaustion. They ate together, scrambled eggs and toast and coffee that the woman drank without complaint, even though Ethan knew it was terrible. Lily chattered about school, about her friend Amy, who might move to Denver, about a book she was reading where a girl found a magical door in her basement. The woman listened, really listened, the kind of attention that made Lily's words come faster, brighter. And Ethan watched them both, his daughter blooming under this stranger's focus, and wondered what the hell he'd brought into his house. After breakfast, Lily cleared the dishes without being asked. The woman Sarah tried to help and winced, her hand going to her ribs again. You should rest, Ethan said. I'm fine. You have at least 2 cracked ribs and a concussion. You're not fine. She looked like she wanted to argue, but pain won out. She sank back onto the couch, and Lily brought her a blanket without being asked, tucking it around her like she was fragile. Thank you, the woman said quietly. You're welcome. Lily hesitated, then blurted, That's a really pretty watch. The woman's hand went to her wrist, instinctively covering the Patek Philippe like she'd forgotten it was there. Thank you. My dad says it's expensive. Lily, Ethan said quietly. Well, you did. The woman looked at Ethan, then at Lily, and something in her face softened. It is expensive. Too expensive, probably. It was a gift. From who? My father. A long time ago. Is he nice? He was complicated. He died 2 years ago. I'm sorry, Lily said and meant it. She understood loss the way most 10-year-olds didn't. Do you miss him? Sometimes. Mostly I miss who I thought he was before I understood what he'd built. The woman caught herself, shook her head. Sorry, that doesn't make sense. But it did, Ethan thought. It made perfect sense. You could miss someone and hate what they'd done, love them and resent their legacy. It was possible to hold both truths at once. He knew. He'd been doing it with Sarah for 8 years. The day passed slowly, the way days did when you were trapped inside watching snowfall. Ethan kept the fire going, checked the woman's vitals, made sure she was eating and drinking. Lily read on the floor by the hearth, occasionally glancing up at their guests like she was a puzzle to be solved. And the woman Sarah, though Ethan still thought of her as the stranger, slept fitfully, waking every few hours with gasps that might have been pain or nightmares. Around 3 in the afternoon, Ethan tried the radio. Static. He tried his cell phone. No signal. They were completely cut off from the world, a cabin full of strangers bound together by snow and circumstance. He was washing dishes when he heard it. The radio in the kitchen, the old transistor that picked up AM stations. If you held it just right, it crackled to life. Ethan dried his hands and tuned it carefully, finding the frequency for the local news station. And still no word on the whereabouts of Moore Hospitality Group, Isabella Moore, who was reported missing 3 days ago after failing to attend a scheduled board meeting in Denver. Authorities say Moore's rental vehicle was last seen leaving the Stapleton Airport heading west toward the mountains. Family spokesperson declined to comment, but sources close to the situation suggest Moore may have been under significant stress related to ongoing corporate restructuring. The Moore family is offering a $50,000 reward for any information leading to. Ethan turned the radio off. In the living room, the woman Isabella, not Sarah, Isabella Moore, Billionaire, CEO of the company that had destroyed his town, sat frozen on the couch, her face the color of ash. Their eyes met across the cabin, and in that moment, Ethan understood several things at once. He understood why she'd run, why she'd lied, why she'd begged him not to let them find her. He understood that the woman he'd saved was the same woman whose company had fired his wife, had closed the resort, had gutted Pine Ridge, and left it to die. And he understood that he had a choice to make. He could tell her he knew, could confront her, accuse her, throw her out into the snow, and let the universe decide if she deserved to survive. Or he could do what he'd always done. He could save her anyway. Isabella, because he couldn't think of her as anything else now, was shaking. Her hands trembled against the blanket, her breathing fast and shallow in a way that had nothing to do with injuries. "You heard," she said, not a question. "Yeah. Are you going to what?" "Call them, collect the reward, turn me in." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the woman who'd signed the papers that ended Sarah's career. Just the person in front of him, scared and hurt and running from something that had driven her into the mountains in winter. "Lines are still down," he said finally. "But when they come back, we'll figure it out." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "No," Ethan agreed. "I don't." He walked back to the kitchen, started putting dishes away, letting the silence stretch. Behind him, he could hear Isabella breathing, trying to get herself under control. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, her book tucked under her arm, her eyes moving between them. "Dad," she said quietly, "what's going on?" "Nothing, Bug." "That's not true." No, it wasn't. "Our guest is just working some things out," Ethan said carefully. Lily looked at Isabella, who was staring at her hands like they held answers. "Is she in trouble?" "Maybe. Bad trouble. I don't know yet." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she walked over to the couch and sat down next to Isabella with all the casual confidence of a child who didn't understand danger. "My dad won't hurt you," Lily said matter-of-factly. "He doesn't hurt people, even when they deserve it." Isabella looked at the 10-year-old beside her, and something in her face broke. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." Lily paused. "Your name's not really Sarah, is it?" "No." "What is it?" Isabella glanced at Ethan, who was watching from the kitchen, his expression unreadable. She took a breath. "Isabella." "That's pretty." Lily smiled. "Better than Sarah, anyway. We already had one of those." The casual mention of her mother made Ethan's chest tighten. But Lily said it without pain, just as fact the way she said everything. His daughter who'd grown up too fast and learned too early that the world didn't promise you anything. "Thank you for not lying anymore," Lily said. Then she picked up her book and went back to reading, as if the conversation was over, the matter settled. Isabella stared at her, then at Ethan. "She's remarkable," Isabella said quietly. "Yeah, she is." "You raised her well." "Her mother raised her. I just tried not to mess it up." "I think you did more than that." Ethan didn't answer. He turned back to the dishes, to the simple task of cleaning things that could be cleaned, fixing things that could be fixed. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, the fire crackled. And between them, the broken billionaire and the broke single dad, a fragile understanding settled like snow. She would stay. He would let her. And neither of them would talk about what happened when the storm ended and the world came back. Not yet. That night after Lily went to bed, Isabella spoke. I should tell you, she said quietly. I should tell you what I'm running from. Ethan was banking the fire, adding a log that would burn through till morning. You don't have to. I think I do. He sat down in the chair across from her, waiting. Isabella stared at the fire for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was flat, empty of everything except exhaustion. My father built more hospitality from nothing. 40 years of work, hundreds of properties, thousands of employees. When he died, I inherited all of it. The company, the board, the shareholders, the expectation that I'd be just like him. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. But I'm not like him. He saw people as assets. I see them as people. And the board hates that. They wanted more profit, more growth, more restructuring. They wanted me to close underperforming properties, cut jobs, maximize shareholder value. And her voice broke. I said yes. I said yes because I was tired of fighting, because they had the votes to remove me anyway. Because I told myself it was just business, that it wasn't personal, that people would land on their feet. She looked at Ethan, and her eyes were full of something that might have been self-hatred. I signed the orders, 12 properties closed, 2,000 jobs gone. And I told myself it was the right thing to do. I told myself I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Ethan said quietly. And when the alternative is losing everything your father built, when you're surrounded by people telling you it's the only way. Yeah, there is. She flinched like he'd hit her. 3 days ago, she continued, I was in a board meeting. They were celebrating, talking about how the restructuring had improved our margins, how the stock price was up. And I sat there and I thought about the people who'd lost their jobs, the towns we'd gutted. And I couldn't breathe. Her hands were shaking again. I walked out, got in my car, drove. I didn't plan it. I just drove. And I ended up here in the mountains on a road I didn't know was closed, and I thought, she stopped. What? Ethan asked. What did you think? Isabella looked at him, and in her eyes, Ethan saw something he recognized. The look of someone who'd been running for so long, they'd forgotten what they were running toward. I thought maybe if I drove far enough, I could escape what I'd done, she whispered. But you can't, can you? You can't outrun yourself. No, Ethan said, you can't. They sat in silence, the fire burning low, the snow falling outside. Two people who'd lost their way, trapped together by weather and fate and choices they couldn't take back. Finally, Isabella spoke again. When you found me in the snow, she said, when you carried me here, did you know who I was? No. If you had known, would you have left me there? It was a fair question, an honest one. Ethan thought about Sarah, about the job she'd lost, about the interview she'd driven to in the snow, about the avalanche that had taken her before she could make it home. He thought about all the ways more hospitality that had gutted his town had taken hope and replaced it with for sale signs and empty storefronts. He thought about the fact that Isabella Moore had the power to change all of that and had chosen not to. I don't know, he said finally. I'd like to think I wouldn't, but I don't know. Isabella nodded slowly, like this was the answer she'd expected. Thank you, she said, for being honest. You're welcome. And Ethan? She looked at him, and her voice was very small. If the road's clear and you decide to turn me in, I won't fight it. I won't run. I think, she took a shaky breath. I think maybe I came here to stop running. Ethan didn't respond. He just stood up, checked the fire one more time, and headed toward his room. At the door, he paused. Your name's not Sarah, he said. No. Good. Sarah was a better person than you. He closed the door quietly, leaving Isabella alone with the fire and the truth. And in the darkness of the cabin, with snow piling against the windows, and the world locked outside, Isabella Moore, who'd had everything and lost herself, put her face in her hands and wept. Morning came with silence. Not the silence of peace, but the thick, heavy quiet that followed confession. Ethan woke to find the cabin filled with pale light filtered through snow-covered windows, and for a moment, just a moment, he forgot that everything had changed. Then he remembered. Isabella Moore, billionaire, CEO, the woman whose company had destroyed his town, sleeping on his couch. He stayed in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling and listening to the cabin settle around him. The storm had finally stopped sometime in the night, leaving behind a world buried in white. Through the window, he could see snow piled 4 feet high against the side of the cabin, drifts that would take days to melt even if the sun came out, which meant Isabella wasn't going anywhere, and neither was he. Ethan got up dressed in the same jeans and flannel he'd worn yesterday and opened his bedroom door quietly. The living room was empty, the couch neatly made, blankets folded, no sign of Isabella, except for her boots lined up by the door. He found her in the kitchen. She was standing at the counter, moving slowly, carefully, like someone whose ribs hurt with every breath. She'd found the coffee pot and was staring at it like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "You put water in the reservoir," Ethan said from the doorway. Isabella jumped, then winced, her hand going to her side. "I didn't hear you." "Water in the reservoir, grounds in the basket. It's not complicated." "I don't." She stopped, took a breath. "I don't usually make my own coffee." Of course she didn't. She probably had assistants for that, people whose job it was to make sure Isabella Moore never had to figure out a coffee pot. Ethan crossed to the counter, filled the reservoir from the tap, measured grounds with practiced efficiency. "You just have to know how." Clearly. They stood there in awkward silence while the coffee brewed, the machine gurgling and hissing like it was offended by the tension in the room. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself, looking smaller than she had yesterday. She'd slept in the clothes Ethan had given her, an old sweatshirt, sweatpants that were too long, and her hair was tangled, the bandage on her head stark white against dark strands. She looked nothing like a billionaire. She looked like someone who'd lost everything and was trying to figure out how to stand upright. "I'm sorry," Isabella said finally, "about last night. I shouldn't have." "You needed to say it." "Maybe, but you didn't need to hear it." Ethan poured coffee into 2 mugs, handed her one. "Drink, you need calories." She took the mug, but didn't drink, just held it like the warmth was what she needed. "I meant what I said, about not running. If you want me to leave in 4 feet of snow, I'd manage." "No, you wouldn't. You'd get 50 yards and freeze to death." He took a sip of his own coffee, bitter and black and honest. "You're stuck here until the road's clear. Might as well accept it. And then we'll see." It wasn't a promise, wasn't forgiveness. Just a statement of fact. They were trapped together, and they'd deal with tomorrow when tomorrow came. Isabella nodded slowly, and something in her shoulders relaxed. Not relief exactly. More like the exhaustion of someone who'd been bracing for a hit and could finally lower their guard. "Thank you," she said quietly. Ethan didn't answer. He just turned back to the counter and started pulling out ingredients for breakfast. Lily emerged an hour later, rubbing sleep from her eyes and announcing she was starving. She looked at Isabella, still moving carefully, still hurting, and immediately started helping with breakfast without being asked. Scrambling eggs while Ethan fried bacon, setting the table, pouring orange juice into mismatched glasses. They ate together, the three of them, in a silence that was less hostile than simply cautious. Lily chattered about the snow, about how deep it was, about how they might be stuck here for days. "Is that okay?" she asked Isabella. "Being stuck here?" "I don't have much choice," Isabella said. "Yeah, but is it okay?" Isabella looked at the girl, at her earnest face and honest eyes, and something in her expression softened. "You know what it might be." After breakfast, Lily disappeared into her room and came back with a stack of board games. "We should do something," she announced. "It's boring just sitting around." "Bug Isabella's hurt. She needs to rest." "I can play a game," Isabella said, "if that's okay." So they played. Monopoly first, because Lily insisted, and Ethan watched as Isabella, who probably negotiated million-dollar deals in boardrooms, struggled with fake money and property cards, while a 10-year-old ruthlessly bankrupted her. "You're terrible at this," Lily said cheerfully as Isabella landed on boardwalk with a hotel. Apparently, Isabella counted out her remaining cash and handed it over. "I'm out. Dad's still in it, though. Want to watch him lose?" "I'd love to." They played for hours, game after game. Scrabble, games that required nothing but time and attention. Games that filled the cabin with Lily's laughter and Ethan's occasional dry commentary, and Isabella's surprise pleasure when she actually won. And slowly, so slowly, Ethan almost didn't notice the tension began to ease. Not gone, not forgiven, just lighter. That afternoon, while Lily napped on the couch, Isabella stood at the kitchen window staring out at the snow-covered valley. Ethan was chopping vegetables for soup, and for a long time neither of them spoke. "It's beautiful here," Isabella said finally. "Yeah." Quiet. That's what happens when there's nothing left. She flinched at that, but didn't turn away from the window. "The town, Pine Ridge, how bad is it? You want the truth or the comfortable version truth?" Ethan set down the knife. "Population's down to 400 from 1,200. Half the storefronts are empty. Schools consolidated. They bus kids to the next county over now. Post office closes at noon because there's not enough mail to justify staying open. People leave as soon as they can afford to, and the ones who stay—" He paused. "The ones who stay are here because they don't have anywhere else to go." Isabella's hands tightened on the windowsill. "And the resort closing, that's what did it. That's what started it. Whispering Pines was the economic engine. 200 jobs, tourists, year-round money flowing through local businesses. When it closed, everything else started failing. Domino effect." "My father built that resort," Isabella said quietly. 1987. He said it was going to put Pine Ridge on the map, and it did for a while. Until it didn't. Until the numbers stopped making sense. Until the board decided smaller markets weren't worth the investment." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were hollow. "Do you know how the decision was made? Spreadsheets, profit margins, return on investment. No one ever came here. No one ever asked what it would mean to the people who lived here. It was just numbers. And you signed off on it." "I signed off on all of them. 12 properties, 2,000 jobs." Her voice cracked. "I told myself it was necessary, that it was just business, that I was protecting the company my father built. But, but I was wrong." She looked back out the window. "I was wrong, and people paid for it, and I can't—" She stopped, her shoulders shaking. Ethan watched her cry, this woman who'd had everything and had wielded it carelessly. Part of him wanted to let her suffer, to say nothing, to let the guilt eat at her the way loss had eaten at him. But another part, the part that had carried her out of the snow, that had saved her when he could have walked away, that part couldn't stay silent. "My wife worked at that resort," he said. Isabella went very still. "Sarah, head housekeeper. She was proud of that job. Proud of the promotion, the benefits, the idea that we were building something stable." He picked up the knife again, started chopping. November 2018. She got the email. Restructuring. Effective immediately. No severance, no notice. Just done. "Ethan." She took it hard. Started applying everywhere. Aspen Vale, Summit County. Got an interview finally in January. 100 miles of mountain road in the middle of winter. I told her to wait, that the weather was bad, but she was scared. Scared we'd lose the house, scared we couldn't afford Lily's school, scared of being the kind of person who couldn't provide. He set the knife down, stared at his hands. "The avalanche hit on Wolf Creek Pass. Highway patrol said it was instantaneous. She didn't suffer." He looked at Isabella. "That's what they tell you, that the person you loved didn't suffer. Like it makes it better." Isabella's face was white. "I'm sorry. God, Ethan, I'm so sorry." "Are you—" "Oh," his voice was flat. "Are you sorry it happened, or sorry you got caught? Sorry 2,000 people lost their jobs, or sorry one of them died and now you have to look at the consequences?" "Both." The word came out strangled. "I'm sorry for all of it. I'm sorry I was weak. I'm sorry I let them push me. I'm sorry I signed in my name to something I knew was wrong. I'm sorry your wife died, and I'm sorry your daughter grew up without her mother, and I'm sorry this town is dying, and I'm—" She broke down, completely sliding to the floor with her back against the cabinet, her face in her hands, sobbing, like something had shattered inside her. Ethan stood there, vegetables, half chopped, watching this billionaire fall apart on his kitchen floor. He should have felt satisfaction, justice, the universe finally holding someone accountable. Instead, he just felt tired. He crouched down beside her, not touching, just present. "Why'd you run?" Isabella looked up at him through tears. "What? 3 days ago, why'd you run?" She wiped her face with shaking hands. "Because I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't sit in another meeting pretending I believed the numbers. Couldn't smile for another camera and say we were maximizing value. Couldn't—" She took a ragged breath. Couldn't be the person they needed me to be. And who's that? My father. They want me to be my father. Cold, calculating, someone who sees people as assets. She laughed bitterly. But I'm not him. I never was. And the harder I tried to be, the more I lost myself. So you drove into the mountains. So I drove into the mountains. No plan, no destination. Just away. She looked at him. And then I crashed, and you saved me, and now I'm sitting on your kitchen floor confessing to the man whose life I destroyed. How's that for irony? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up, offered his hand. Isabella stared at it like it was a trick. Get up, he said. Soup's not going to cook itself. You want me to help. I want you to stop sitting on my floor. If you're going to cry, at least be useful. It was harsh, maybe too harsh. But Isabella took his hand and let him pull her up, and something in her eyes said she understood. This wasn't forgiveness. This was just survival. And sometimes survival was enough. They made soup together. Ethan showed Isabella how to dice onions without crying, how to season by taste instead of recipe, how to work with what you had instead of what you wished for. She was clumsy at first, her knife work terrible, her measurements uncertain. But she learned. And Ethan realized, watching her concentrate on something as simple as chopping carrots, that maybe this was what she'd been missing. Not complexity, not power, just the chance to be human. Lily woke up when the soup was simmering, drawn by the smell. She set the table without being asked, and they ate together as daylight faded and the cabin filled with the warm smell of food and fire. This is good, Lily said, reaching for seconds. Did you make this, Dad? Isabella helped. Lily looked at Isabella with surprise. Really, you can cook? Not well, Isabella admitted, but I'm learning. That's cool. Dad's a good teacher. He taught me how to make pancakes when I was 7. Did he? Yeah, Mom used to make them, but after she died, Dad said we had to learn to take care of ourselves. Lily said it matter-of-factly, the way she said everything about her mother. Just truth, no decoration. So now we can. Isabella looked at Ethan, and he saw the recognition in her eyes. Understanding maybe of what it meant to raise a child alone, to teach resilience because hope was too expensive. That's a good skill to have, Isabella said softly. Yeah, Dad says if you can feed yourself and fix things, you can survive anything. Your dad's right. They finished dinner in comfortable silence, and afterward Lily insisted they play cards again. They sat by the fire, Ethan in his chair, Lily and Isabella on the floor playing Go Fish and Old Maid, while snow began to fall again outside. And somewhere in the middle of the third game, Ethan realized something had shifted. Not forgiveness. He wasn't ready for that, might never be ready for that. But something else. A tentative truce. A recognition that they were all just people trying to survive their own avalanches, their own storms, their own poor decisions. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, after Lily went to bed, Isabella and Ethan sat by the fire in silence. The kind of silence that didn't need filling, that was just two people existing in the same space without pretense. Finally, Isabella spoke. Can I ask you something? Yeah. Why are you being kind to me after everything I just told you, after what my company did? Why aren't you throwing me out? Ethan stared at the fire, watching flames consume wood, turning solid into smoke. You want the honest answer? Please, I don't know, he glanced at her. Part of me wants to hate you, wants to blame you for Sarah, for the town, for all of it. And maybe I do. Maybe I will. But right now, he trailed off. Right now what? Isabella prompted. Right now, you're just someone who's hurt and scared and trying to figure out what comes next. Same as me. Same as everyone in this town. He shrugged. I can hate you tomorrow. Today, I'll just make sure you don't die. Isabella laughed. It actually laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. That's very practical. I'm a practical man. I'm starting to see that. They sat in silence again, and then Isabella said quietly, Lily asked me today if I had kids. What did you tell her? No, I told her I'd wanted them once, but the business always came first. And by the time I realized what I'd sacrificed, it was too late. She pulled the blanket tighter. She said it wasn't too late for anything. That her dad always says you can start over as many times as you need to. She's a smart kid. She's an incredible kid. You should be proud. I am. Did you ever think about leaving? After Sarah died, taking Lily somewhere with more opportunities. Ethan considered the question. Yeah, every time I couldn't make rent. Every time Lily came home talking about another friend moving away. Every time I looked at this town and saw what it used to be. But you stayed. I stayed. Why? Because running doesn't fix anything. It just changes the scenery. He met her eyes. You know that now, don't you? Isabella nodded slowly. Yeah, I do. So what are you going to do about it? About what? About the fact that you can't outrun yourself. About the 12 properties and the 2,000 jobs and all the other decisions you regret. What are you going to do? She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything I can do. There's always something you can do. Like what? Write them all checks. Say, I'm sorry. It doesn't bring back their jobs. Doesn't fix the towns. Doesn't... She stopped. Doesn't bring back your wife. No, it doesn't. So what's the point? Ethan stood up, added another log to the fire. Sparks flew up the chimney, bright and brief and gone. The point, he said, is that you do it anyway. You fix what you can fix. You help who you can help. You don't do it because it erases the past. You do it because it's what comes next. Isabella stared at him. You sound like you're speaking from experience. I am. After Sarah died, I spent a year drowning, drinking mostly, not taking care of Lily the way I should have, not taking care of myself. I was stuck in what I'd lost, and I couldn't see what I still had. What changed? Lily did. She was 9 years old, and she made me breakfast one morning, burned toast and runny eggs, and she said, Dad, Mom's gone, but we're still here, so we have to try. He smiled at the memory. 9 years old, and she was right. So you started trying. So I started trying, got sober, got a chow, started showing up for the life I still had instead of mourning the one I'd lost. He looked at Isabella. It didn't fix everything, didn't make me happy, but it made me functional. And functional was enough. Is it still enough? Most days. Isabella pulled her knees to her chest, wincing at the pain in her ribs. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Strength's got nothing to do with it. It's just stubbornness, just deciding that you're going to get up tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that, and eventually it starts to feel less like drowning. And if it doesn't, then you keep going anyway. They sat in silence, the fire crackling, the cabin settling into the cold. Outside, snow was falling again, soft and relentless, burying the world in white. And inside, two broken people sat together in the dark, not healing exactly, but maybe, just maybe, learning how to breathe again. The next morning, Ethan woke to find Isabella in the kitchen again. But this time, she'd figured out the coffee pot. 2 mugs sat on the counter, steam rising, and she looked up when he entered. I made coffee, she said almost shyly. I see that. It's probably terrible. He took a sip. It was weak and bitter at the same time, an accomplishment in its own way. It's coffee. Diplomatic. Practical. She smiled, and it was real, this not the careful corporate smile she'd worn before. Just a woman who'd made bad coffee and was okay with that. They drank together in silence, and then Isabella said, I've been thinking about what you said, about doing what comes next. Yeah, if I survive this, if I make it back, I'm going to resign. Ethan looked at her carefully. From the company, from everything, CEO, board positions, all of it. I'll stay on as shareholder, but I'm done pretending I'm my father. She set down her mug, and I'm going to use whatever influence I have left to fix what I can fix. Starting where? Starting here, Pine Ridge, the 12 properties we closed. I can't undo what's done, but maybe I can, she trailed off. I don't know. Make it less awful. That's a start. It doesn't fix what happened to Sarah. No, it doesn't. Does that matter to you that I'm trying? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, ask me in a month, after you have actually done it, after it's more than just words. Isabella nodded slowly. That's fair. Good. Ethan, she looked at him and her eyes were clear, honest. Thank you for not letting me die, for not throwing me out, she gestured at the cabin, at the life he'd let her glimpse. For this. You're welcome, even though I don't deserve it, especially because you don't deserve it. That's what grace means. He finished his coffee, set the mug in the sink. Now come on. If you're staying another day, you might as well learn how to do dishes. And Isabella Moore, billionaire CEO woman who'd had everything and lost herself, laughed and learned how to wash dishes and took the first small step toward becoming someone she could live with. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the fire kept burning. And in the space between past and future, three people learned what it meant to just be present. For now, it was enough. The helicopter came on the fourth day. Ethan heard at first the distant thump of rotors cutting through mountain air, a sound that didn't belong in the silence they'd built. He was outside shoveling a path to the woodshed, and he stopped mid-motion, leaning on the shovel and listening to the sound grow louder. Isabella heard it too. He could see her through the window, standing in the kitchen where she'd been learning to make bread, her hands covered in flour, her face going white. The helicopter appeared over the ridge, red and white search and rescue markings on the side. It circled once, then twice, and Ethan knew what was happening before it happened. Someone had found the rental car. Someone had started searching. Someone had put the pieces together. The helicopter couldn't land not with the snow this deep, but it hovered low enough that Ethan could see faces in the windows, could see someone pointing at the cabin, at the smoke rising from the chimney. Then it banked away, heading back the way it had come, and Ethan knew. They had maybe an hour, maybe two. He went inside. Isabella was still standing at the counter, frozen flour on her hands and terror in her eyes. Lily had come out of her room, looking between them with that careful assessment she'd learned too young. "They found you," Ethan said. Not a question. "Yes." Isabella's voice was barely audible. "They'll be back. With vehicles if they can make it, snowmobiles if they can't." "I know. So what do you want to do?" Isabella looked at him, at Lily, at the cabin where she'd spent 4 days learning how to be human again. "I don't know." That's not an answer. "I know it's not." She turned to the window, staring out at the valley that had become briefly a kind of sanctuary. If I go back to that life, I'll lose this. Whatever this is, this feeling of being real." Lily supplied quietly. Isabella looked at the 10-year-old and nodded. "Yeah, real." "But you can't stay here," Lily said with the blunt practicality of a child who understood how the world worked. "Can you?" "No, sweetie, I can't." Ethan watched them both, watched Isabella, struggling with the weight of return, watched his daughter trying to comfort a woman who'd destroyed their town. And he realized something. This wasn't about him anymore. Wasn't about his anger or his grief or his right to hate Isabella Moore for what she'd done. This was about what happened next. "You said you were going to resign," Ethan said quietly. "Fix what you could fix." "I said that." "Did you mean it?" Isabella turned to look at him, and her eyes were red but clear. "Yes." "Then you need to go back. You need to face it. Running away again, that's just more of the same." "I know." So she took a breath, wiped flour from her hands, straightened her shoulders. Ethan watched her put the armor back on, not the corporate mask exactly, but something close. The posture of someone preparing for battle. "So I go back," she said. They came 90 minutes later, 2 snowmobiles and a county sheriff's SUV that had somehow made it up the access road. Ethan watched from the window as they pulled up, as people in official jackets dismounted and approached the cabin with the careful urgency of people who'd been searching for days. Sheriff Tom Brennan was first through the door. He was 60, gray-haired, and he'd known Ethan since Ethan was a kid stealing candy from the general store. "Ethan," he said, stamping snow from his boots. "You okay?" "Fine, Tom. Got a report of a crashed vehicle, possible injured party." His eyes went past Ethan to where Isabella stood by the fire, and his expression shifted. Recognition. "Ms. Moore." "Sheriff," Isabella's voice was steady. "You've got a lot of people worried, Ibrahim. Your office has been calling every law enforcement agency in 3 states. I'm aware. You want to tell me what you're doing up here? I needed some time away. I made poor decisions. Mr. Cole saved my life." Tom looked between them, calculating. He was small-town sheriff, but he wasn't stupid. He could read the tension in the room, could see the 4 days of living together written on their faces. "Your vehicle's at the bottom of a ravine," he said. "Could have killed you." "It nearly did. Medical team standing by. We need to get you checked out, make sure there's no internal injuries." I'm fine, Aisha. With respect, Miss Moore, that's not for you to decide. Tom glanced at Ethan. You provide first aid. Yeah, head wound, possible concussion, cracked ribs. She's been resting. Good work. Tom keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Brennan. Located the missing party. She's alive and conscious. Requesting medical evac. The radio crackled with acknowledgement, and Tom turned back to Isabella. Helicopter will be here in 20 minutes. You need to gather your things. I don't have things. I lost everything in the crash. Then I guess you're ready to go. Isabella looked at Ethan and he saw the question in her eyes. Help me. Tell me I don't have to do this. But he just looked back steadily and she understood. This was her choice. Her moment. 20 minutes, she said quietly. Tom nodded and stepped outside to coordinate with his team, leaving Ethan, Isabella, and Lily alone in the cabin that had become something like home. Well, Isabella said with false loudness, I guess this is it. Guess so, Ethan said. Lily crossed to Isabella and wrapped her arms around her waist, carefully avoiding her ribs. Isabella froze for a moment, then hugged her back, her eyes squeezing shut against the tears. Thank you, Isabella whispered, for being kind to me, for teaching me about games and breakfast and what it means to just be. You're welcome. Lily pulled back, looking up at her. Are you going to be okay? I don't know, sweetie, but I'm going to try. Good. Dad says trying is the important part. Your dad's right about a lot of things. Lily smiled, then went to her room, giving them space. And Ethan and Isabella stood across from each other in the cabin, 4 days of shared life, hanging between them like snow waiting to fall. I meant what I said, Isabella said, about resigning, about fixing things. I know. Do you believe me? Ethan considered lying, considered giving her comfort, but that wasn't what she needed. What she needed was the same thing he'd needed that after Sarah died, truth, even when it hurt. I want to, he said, but words are easy, Shindar what matter. I'll prove it to you. You don't have to prove it to me, you have to prove it to yourself. She nodded slowly, understanding. Ethan, can I ask you something? Yeah. Do you think, she stopped, started again. Do you think Sarah would have forgiven me if she'd lived, if she'd known the whole story? It was a question Ethan had been asking himself for 4 days, and he still didn't have a good answer. I don't know, he said honestly. Sarah was better than me, kinder, more willing to see the good in people. But I don't know if that extends to forgiving the person whose signature cost her everything. That's what I thought. Isabella's voice was small. But Ethan continued. She also believed people could change, believed in second chances. She gave me about 50 of them over the years. So maybe, if you earned it. Isabella smiled sadly. That seems to be the theme. Earning it. Yeah, it is. Outside they could hear the helicopter approaching. The thump of rotors getting louder, the sound of return growing imminent. I don't want to go, Isabella said quietly. I know. These 4 days, they've been the most real thing I've experienced in years. And now I have to go back to being Isabella Moore, CEO Billionaire. They all love it. No, you don't. She looked at him surprised. You have to go back, Ethan said. But you don't have to go back as the same person. That's the whole point. Is it that simple? No, it's that hard, but it's possible. The helicopter was overhead now, the sound deafening snow whipping up in the downdraft. Through the window, Ethan could see it settling into the clearing near the cabin, medical personnel jumping out. I should go, Isabella said. Yeah. She started toward the door, then stopped, turned back. Ethan, will I see you again? He thought about it. Thought about all the reasons to say no, to let this be the end of it. Thought about Sarah and the town and 8 years of grief. Then he thought about the woman who'd learned to make coffee and wash dishes and cry on his kitchen floor. If you do what you said you'd do, he said finally, then yeah, you'll see me again. It wasn't a promise, wasn't forgiveness, just a door left open instead of slammed shut. Isabella nodded, understanding. Then she walked out into the snow and the noise and the return of the world she'd tried to escape. Ethan watched from the window as they loaded her onto the helicopter, as medical personnel checked her over, as Sheriff Tom coordinated with his team. Lily came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. Is she going to be okay? Lily asked. I don't know, Bug. I hope so. I liked her. Yeah, me too. The helicopter lifted off, banking away towards civilization. Ethan and Lily stood at the window watching it disappear over the ridge, taking Isabella Moore back to the life she'd tried to run from. And in the silence that followed, Ethan realized something. He wasn't as angry as he'd been 4 days ago, wasn't as certain in his hatred, wasn't as convinced that Isabella Moore was nothing but the signature on a termination letter. She was also a person, flawed and broken, and trying same as everyone. It didn't erase what she'd done, didn't bring Sarah back, didn't fix the town, but it was something. "Come on," Ethan said to Lily, "let's clean up." They spent the afternoon putting the cabin back in order, washing the sheets Isabella had used, storing the extra blankets, erasing the physical evidence of her presence. But her absence was still there in the kitchen, where she'd learned to make coffee at the table, where she'd played games with Lily by the fire, where she'd confessed her sins. That evening, as Ethan was making dinner, Lily said, "Dad, do you think she'll really come back?" "I don't know." "But you told her she would see us again." "I told her if she does what she said she'd do, she might see us again." "That's different." "Why?" Ethan turned from the stove, looked at his daughter. "Because talk is cheap bug. People say a lot of things when they're scared or hurt or trying to feel better about themselves. The question is whether they follow through when it's hard." "Do you think she will?" "I don't know, but I guess we'll find out." They ate dinner in a silence that felt emptier than before. 4 days of 3 people had become normal, and returning to 2 felt like subtraction. That night, Ethan sat by the fire alone, staring at the flames and thinking about Isabella Moore. About the woman who'd arrived broken and left still broken, but maybe with the tools to start fixing herself. He thought about Sarah, about whether she would have wanted him to hate Isabella or to give her a chance. He thought about Lily, who'd offered kindness without hesitation, who'd hugged a billionaire like she was just another person who needed comfort. And he thought about himself, about the man he'd been 4 days ago and the man he was now. Still angry, still grieving, still carrying the weight of loss. But maybe, just maybe, carrying it a little differently. The fire crackled, the cabin settled, and somewhere far away in a hospital or an office or a boardroom, Isabella Moore was facing the consequences of her return. Ethan didn't pray, didn't believe in much beyond what he could see and touch and hold. But he sat there in the firelight and he thought, if you're going to do it right. Don't make it easy on yourself. Don't take shortcuts. Do the hard thing. And then he went to bed, because tomorrow would come regardless, and the work of living would continue. With or without Isabella Moore. With or without forgiveness. With or without resolution. 3 days later, the mail came. It was unusual. Mail service had been sporadic since the storm, but there it was, a thick envelope with its return address in Denver. Ethan opened it, standing at the counter, and inside was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery. "Ethan, I'm writing this from a hospital room where doctors are telling me I'm lucky to be alive. They don't know the half of it. I wanted you to know I meant what I said. This morning I submitted my resignation to the board. By the time you read this, it will be public. I'm done with being CEO. But I'm not done with fixing what I can fix. I've hired lawyers, accountants, people who know how to undo corporate decisions. I'm starting with the 12 properties we closed. I can't reopen all of them. Some are truly not viable, but I can invest in the communities we abandoned, Pine Ridge included. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't expect you to trust me. But I wanted you to know that what happened in your cabin, those 4 days of being real, that changed me. And I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to be worthy of that. Thank you for everything. Tell Lily I'm practicing making coffee." Isabella. Ethan read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where he kept important things. Lily came home from the bus stop and found him at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong." "Then why do you look weird?" He smiled despite himself. "Got a letter from Isabella." "Really?" Lily dropped her backpack. "What did she say?" "She resigned from her company." "She actually did it?" "Says she did." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, "Are you surprised?" Ethan thought about it. Was he surprised, or had he known somehow that Isabella Moore wasn't the type to make promises she didn't keep? "No," he said finally. "I'm not surprised." "So what happens now?" "Now we wait, see if she follows through on the rest of it. And if she does, then maybe we give her a chance." Lily nodded, satisfied with that answer. She went to her room to do homework, leaving Ethan alone with the letter and the question of what came next. Outside, the snow was melting. Spring was coming early, the valley turning from white to brown to the first hints of green. And with it came the possibility, not the promise, but the possibility that things could change, that people could change, that even the deepest wounds could with time and effort and grace begin to heal. Ethan didn't know if he believed it yet, but for the first time in 8 years, he was willing to find out. 3 months later, Pine Ridge woke up to news. Ethan heard about it from Jim at the ranger station, who'd heard it from the mayor who'd gotten a call from some lawyer in Denver. More Hospitality Group, or what was left of it, was making an announcement. Investment initiative, Jim said, reading from a printout. Community revitalization, starting with the 12 markets affected by the 2018 restructuring. He looked at Ethan over his reading glasses. That's us. What kind of investment? Doesn't say specifics, just that there'll be a town meeting next week. Representatives from the company coming to present options. Jim set down the paper. You think this is real? Ethan thought about the letter he'd received 3 months ago. Thought about Isabella's words, her promises, her broken expression in his cabin. I don't know. But it might be. The news spread through town like fire through dry grass. By evening, everyone knew. The diner was packed with people speculating, arguing, hoping, doubting. Ethan avoided it, went home to Lily, made dinner in the quiet of the cabin. Is Isabella coming? Lily asked over spaghetti. I don't know, Bug. Would you want her to? Ethan considered the question. 3 months ago, he would have said no without hesitation. Now, I don't know that either. I would, Lily said simply. I want to see if she learned how to make coffee. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. The town meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the high school gym, the only space big enough to hold everyone who wanted to attend. Ethan showed up 15 minutes early and found the place already half full. People he'd known his whole life, people who'd lost jobs and homes and hope when the resort closed. Sheriff Tom was there keeping order. Mayor Patricia Chen stood at the front looking nervous. And at a table on the stage sat 3 people in business clothes setting up a laptop and projector. Isabella wasn't among them. Ethan felt something deflate in his chest. Disappointment, maybe. Or just confirmation of what he'd expected all along, that Isabella Moore had gone back to her world and hired people to handle the messy work of redemption. The meeting started promptly at 7. Patricia welcomed everyone, introduced the Moore hospitality representatives. A woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to the mayor, stood up and began a presentation. 3 months ago, she said, Isabella Moore stepped down as CEO of Moore Hospitality Group. One of her final acts was to establish the Community Restoration Fund, seeded with $50 million of her personal wealth. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. $50 million was a number that didn't mean anything to most people in Pine Ridge, but they understood it was significant. The fund has one purpose, Sarah continued, to repair the damage done by the 2018 restructuring, not with handouts, not with charity, but with sustainable, community-driven investment. She clicked to the next slide. For Pine Ridge specifically, we're proposing 3 initiatives. The first was infrastructure, repair roads, utilities, broadband, internet. Things the town couldn't afford but desperately needed. The second was a small business incubator, grants and low-interest loans for local entrepreneurs with preference for businesses that created jobs. The third was the old resort. Whispering Pines has been empty for 8 years, Sarah said. We're proposing to donate the property to the town. Not to reopen as a resort, the economics don't support that, but to reimagine it. Community center, affordable housing, local businesses, whatever Pine Ridge decides it needs. The room erupted, people shouting, questions, arguments breaking out, hope and skepticism colliding like weather fronts. Patricia had to bang the gavel 3 times to restore order. This is a lot to process, Patricia said. We'll need to form committees, study the proposals, vote on whether to accept. But I want to be clear, this is real. The money is in escrow. The lawyers have verified it. This is happening if we want it. Why? Someone shouted from the back. Why now? Why does Isabella Moore suddenly care? Sarah Chen looked uncomfortable. Ms. Moore has declined to make public statements about her motivations. She's asked that the work speak for itself. That's convenient, another voice called out. Make a grand gesture and hide behind lawyers. She's not hiding. The voice came from the back of the gym. Everyone turned. Isabella Moore stood in the doorway wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back, no makeup, no jewelry except the watch on her wrist. She looked smaller than Ethan remembered, more human. She walked down the center aisle and the room went silent. People parted to let her through, watching her like she was something dangerous or miraculous or both. She climbed the steps to the stage and Patricia offered her the microphone with shaking hands. Isabella held it for a long moment, looking out at the faces of people whose lives she'd destroyed. Then she spoke. My name is Isabella Moore. 8 years ago, I signed in the order that closed Whispering Pines Resort. I did it because a board full of men in suits told me it was necessary. Because the numbers said it made sense. Because I was weak and scared and more concerned with protecting my father's legacy than with understanding what that decision would mean to real people. Her voice was steady but quiet. People in the back leaned forward to hear. I told myself it was just business, that it wasn't personal, that people would land on their feet. But I was wrong. It was personal. It was 200 jobs and 200 families in a town that depended on those jobs to survive. She paused and Ethan could see her hands trembling. 3 months ago, I had a car accident on a mountain road. A man named Ethan Cole saved my life. He carried me off that mountain, took me into his home, cared for me, even though he had no reason to. And during the 4 days I spent in his cabin, I learned something. She looked directly at Ethan, and he felt the weight of every eye in the room follow her gaze. I learned that I'd been living wrong, that I'd confused wealth with richness, power with purpose, success with meaning. And I learned that the decisions I'd made, the ones I thought were just business, they had names, they had faces, they had consequences that I'd never bothered to see. Isabella turned back to the crowd. I can't undo what I did. I can't bring back the 8 years of decline. I can't restore what was lost. But I can try to make it less awful. Not because it absolves me, not because it earns forgiveness, but because it's what I should have done in the first place. She set the microphone down and the gym was silent. Then someone started clapping. Just one person at first, then another, then more. Not everyone there were people who sat with arms crossed, faces hard, but enough. Enough to fill the space with sound that wasn't quite forgiveness, but might have been acknowledgement. Isabella stepped back and Sarah Chen resumed the presentation. But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. He was watching Isabella, who'd retreated to the side of the stage, who stood there with her head down and her shoulders shaking slightly. Lily tugged on his sleeve. Can we talk to her after? I don't know if that's a good idea, Bug. Why not? She came all this way. That doesn't mean Dad. Lily looked at him with those old eyes. She's scared. Can't you see it? She needs someone to tell her it's okay. It's not okay. No, but she tried. Doesn't that count for something? Ethan looked at his daughter, 10 years old and already wiser than he was, and realized she was right. Trying wasn't everything, but it was something. After the meeting, most people filed out, still arguing, still processing. Ethan waited while Patricia and the Moore representatives packed up, while Sheriff Tom coordinated with his deputies, while the gym slowly emptied. Isabella was standing alone near the stage looking lost. Lily walked up to her first. Hi. Isabella turned and her face transformed when she saw Lily. Hi, sweetie. Did you learn to make coffee? Isabella laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. I did. It's still terrible, but I'm getting better. That's good. Dad says you get better by practicing. Your dad's right. Ethan approached slowly and Isabella's smile faded. Not disappeared, just shifted into something more careful, more uncertain. Ethan, she said quietly. Isabella. I didn't know if you'd come tonight. Wouldn't have missed it. She searched his face for judgment, for anger, for condemnation. He let her look. What did you think? She asked finally. Of the proposal, I think it's a good start. Just a start. You said 50 million. That's your money, not the company's. Yes. That's a lot of trying. Is it enough? Ethan thought about Sarah, about the resort closing, about 8 years of watching his town die. Thought about 4 days in a cabin where a broken billionaire learned to be human. No, he said honestly. It's not enough to fix everything, but it's enough to matter. Isabella nodded slowly, understanding. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Good, because I'm not offering it. But But I'm not standing in your way either. It was the most he could give, and Isabella seemed to understand. She smiled small and real and said, "Thank you." Lily, who'd been listening to all this with the solemn attention of a child witnessing adult complexity, said, "Are you staying in town? For a few days, I want to meet with business owners, hear what they need, see how we can help. You should come to dinner." "Lily," Ethan started. Lily insisted. "She came all this way, and she probably doesn't know where to eat because the diner closes at 8 and the other restaurant is bad." Isabella looked at Ethan questioning. He sighed. "Lily's right. The other restaurant is bad. Is that an invitation?" "It's an acknowledgement of facts. What you do with it is up to you." Isabella smiled. "What time?" "6 tomorrow. Don't be late." "I won't." She showed up at 5:50 holding a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Ethan's truck and looking nervous. Ethan let her in, took the wine, set it aside without opening it. "We don't drink," he said. "Oh, I'm sorry, I should have." "It's fine, we'll save it for something." Lily appeared from her room and immediately dragged Isabella to the table, chattering about school and friends and a science project involving volcanoes. Isabella listened with the same complete attention she'd given before, and Ethan watched them while he finished making dinner. They ate together, spaghetti and salad and bread that Isabella had brought from a bakery in Denver. It was good bread, crusty and warm, the kind you couldn't get in Pine Ridge. "I've been practicing cooking," Isabella said. "I'm still not very good, but I can make scrambled eggs without burning them now." "That's progress," Ethan said. "It is. I also learned how to do laundry, which is harder than it looks." "You didn't know how to do laundry?" Lily was amazed. "I had people for that. I had people for everything. And then I realized I didn't know how to do anything that actually mattered." "So you learn." "So I'm learning." They talked through dinner about the town meeting, about the proposals, about what came next. Isabella had ideas careful and considered, but she kept asking what Ethan thought, what the town needed, deferring to his knowledge instead of assuming hers. It was different from before, humbler, more real. After dinner, Lily went to her room to do homework, and Ethan and Isabella washed dishes together in the same rhythm they'd found 3 months ago. Wash, rinse, dry, put away. "I've been doing this every night," Isabella said quietly. "Dishes. It's meditative." "Yeah. I think about what you taught me, about being present, about doing the work that's in front of you instead of always looking ahead to the next thing. And and it's hard, but it's good." She handed him a plate to dry. "I fired most of my staff." "What?" "Not the people who needed the assistants, the handlers, the people whose job it was to make sure I never had to do anything myself. I kept a small team, people who actually help versus people who just insulate me from reality." "How's that going?" "Terrifying, but also freeing." She smiled. "Last week I went to a grocery store by myself, just walked in and bought food like a normal person. Revolutionary. For me it was." They finished the dishes in silence, and then Isabella said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." Do you think it's possible for someone to change, really change, not just perform change?" Ethan dried the last dish, set it in the cupboard. "I think people can choose to be different. Whether that's the same as changing, I don't know. But you've seen it. People choosing to be different." "Yeah, I've seen it." "Who?" He looked at her. "You." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "I'm trying. I know it's not enough. I know it doesn't fix what I did, but I know. I can see it. Does that matter to you?" Ethan thought about it. Did it matter? Did watching Isabella Moore learn to wash dishes and make coffee and show up to town meetings change anything about what had happened to Sarah, to the town, to the 8 years of decline numb? But did it matter that someone was trying to be better, to do better, to live like they understood the weight of their choices? Yeah, it did. "Yes," he said finally, "it matters." Isabella wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For leaving the door open when you could have slammed it shut. That's Lily's doing, not mine. She's the one who insisted you were worth giving a chance to. She's an incredible kid." "Yeah, she is." They moved to the living room, sat by the fire that Ethan built the way he'd built it for 3 months, carefully, methodically, with attention to what came next. Isabella sat on the couch and Ethan took his chair, And for a while, they just existed in the same space. What happens now? Isabella asked finally. Now you follow through. You do what you said you'd do. You show up for the hard work of making it right. And if I do, then maybe we become something like friends. I'd like that. Don't like it yet? Earn it first. Isabella smiled. Yes, sir. Lily emerged from her room, announced she was going to bed, hugged her father, and then without hesitation, hugged Isabella too. I'm glad you came back, Lily said. Me too, sweetie. Are you going to keep coming back? Isabella looked at Ethan, who was watching them both with an expression she couldn't read. If your dad will let me. He will, Lily said with certainty. He's stubborn, but he's not mean. She went to bed, and Isabella stood to leave. Ethan walked her to the door, and they stood there in the threshold between inside and outside warmth and cold, the life they'd shared and the lives they'd returned to. Thank you, Isabella said, for tonight, for everything. You're welcome. Ethan, she hesitated. I know I can't fix what happened to Sarah. I know that no amount of money or programs or apologies will bring her back. But I want you to know that I think about her, about what she lost, about what you lost. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ethan nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, might never be forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. Drive safe, he said. I will. She walked to her car, not a rental this time, but something modest, practical, chosen for function instead of status. She drove away slowly, carefully, her taillights disappearing down the mountain road. And Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her go, feeling something shift in his chest. Not healing, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Over the next 3 months, Isabella kept coming back. She attended town council meetings, met with business owners, sat in the diner and listened to people's ideas, their complaints, their hopes. She didn't make promises she couldn't keep, didn't throw money at problems and walk away. She did the slow, hard work of rebuilding trust, one conversation at a time. And slowly, painfully slowly, Pine Ridge began to change. The infrastructure money came through. Roads got repaved. Broadband got installed. The old resort building became a community space with affordable apartments on the upper floors and small business incubators on the ground level. Jobs started coming back. Not all at once, not like before, but enough that the for sale signs started coming down, that young families started staying instead of leaving, that the school stopped talking about consolidation. It wasn't a miracle, it was just work, and Isabella did the work. She also kept coming to dinner. Once a week at first, then twice, then whenever she was in town. She and Lily became friends, real friends, the kind where Lily felt comfortable calling her out when she messed up or telling her about problems at school. And she and Ethan became something. Not friends exactly. The history was too complicated for that. But not enemies either. Something in between. Something being built one conversation at a time. So, 1 year after the town meeting on a Thursday evening in April, Isabella showed up at the cabin with a picnic basket. What's this? Ethan asked. I learned to cook. Real cooking, not just eggs. I wanted to show you. They drove up to the ridge where the old resort stood, where Ethan had found Isabella's crashed car a year ago. The building was transformed now, windows repaired, fresh paint, solar panels on the roof. A group of kids played basketball in the parking lot. Lights glowed from the apartments above. They spread a blanket on the hillside and ate the food Isabella had made. It was good, not perfect, but honest. The kind of food that tasted like effort. You really did learn to cook, Ethan said. I really did. She smiled. I'm thinking of taking a class, professional level, maybe opening a small restaurant someday. You a restaurant? Why not? I've spent my whole life in hospitality. Might as well do it in a way that actually feeds people. Ethan laughed and the sound felt good. Natural. Like something he'd forgotten he knew how to do. They sat in silence, watching the sunset over the valley, watching Pine Ridge transform from dying town to something else. Something possible. Can I tell you something? Isabella said quietly. Yeah. That day you found me in the snow, I wasn't trying to drive anywhere. I was just driving. Away from everything. And part of me hoped. She stopped. Hoped what? Ethan prompted. Hoped I wouldn't make it. Hoped the decision would be taken out of my hands. Ethan looked at her, at this woman who'd had everything and had nearly thrown it all away. And now I'm glad you found me. Glad you didn't let me quit. Glad you taught me that trying matters even when you don't think you deserve to try. I didn't teach you that. You learned it yourself. Maybe, but you gave me the space to learn. They watched the valley turn from gold to purple to blue. Lily was down there somewhere at a friend's house doing kid things. The town was down there doing town things. Life continuing, persistent, stubborn. She would have liked you, Ethan said suddenly. Isabella looked at him. Sarah. Yeah, she would have been mad as hell about what you did, but she would have liked who you're trying to become. You think so? I know so. She believed in second chances, gave me enough of them. Do you? Isabella's voice was careful. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? Ethan thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know, he said honestly. Some days I think maybe. Other days I remember her driving to that interview and I want to hate you all over again. But, but, but I'm trying not to, and I think that's progress. Isabella nodded, understanding. Thank you for trying. You're welcome. They packed up the picnic, drove back to the cabin. At the door, Isabella hesitated. Ethan, yeah, I know this is probably too much too soon, but would you ever consider letting me invest in something for Lily College Fund maybe, or? No, I just thought. I said no. Isabella flinched and Ethan realized how harsh he had sounded. He softened his voice. Lily's my responsibility, not yours. You want to help the town, help kids in general, that's different. But Lily's mine to take care of. I understand. I'm sorry for overstepping. It's fine. Just there are lines and that's one of them. Okay, I'll remember that. She drove away and Ethan watched her go, feeling the familiar weight of boundaries and pride and the complicated work of accepting help without losing yourself. 2 years after the accident, on a Saturday morning in December, Ethan woke to find Lily making breakfast. What's this? He asked. Isabella's coming over. I invited her. You invited her. Yeah, is that okay? Ethan thought about it. 2 years ago, the answer would have been no. 1 year ago, it would have been maybe. Now, yeah, Bug, it's okay. Isabella arrived at 9 carrying groceries and a smile. She'd changed over the past 2 years, more lines around her eyes, more gray in her hair, but also something lighter. Less burdened, more at peace. They cooked together, the three of them. Pancakes and bacon and eggs, nothing fancy but made with attention. And as they worked, Ethan realized something. This felt normal, natural, like Isabella had always been part of their Saturday mornings, part of their life. It still wasn't forgiveness, might never be forgiveness, but it was something else, acceptance maybe. Or just the recognition that people were more than their worst decisions, that change was possible, that grace meant leaving room for others to become who they were trying to be. After breakfast, Lily asked if they could go up to the ridge, see the new community center. Isabella and Ethan agreed, and they piled into Ethan's truck, still the same truck still running on hope and maintenance, and drove up the mountain. The community center was full of people, kids taking music lessons, seniors in a fitness class, young entrepreneurs in the business incubator offices. Life abundant and persistent. They walked through it together, and Ethan watched Isabella watch the people. Saw her face when a kid recognized her and said thank you. Saw her eyes fill when an old man told her his grandson was moving back to town because there were jobs now. Outside, standing on the ridge where everything had started, Isabella said quietly, I spent my whole life thinking wealth was about what you had. How much money, how much power, how much control. But I was wrong. What's it about? Lily asked. Isabella looked at the valley below, at the town coming back to life, at Ethan and Lily standing beside her. It's about what you give, who you become, the lives you touch, and the space you leave better than you found it. That's very philosophical, Ethan said dryly. It's very true. Ooh, Isabella corrected. Maybe. She looked at him. Do you think I've left things better? You asking for a grade? I'm asking for honesty. Ethan looked at Pine Ridge, at the new businesses and the repaired roads and the kids playing in parks that had been empty for years. Looked at Isabella, who'd given up her CEO title and her comfort and her carefully constructed life to do the slow work of redemption. Looked at his daughter, who'd befriended a billionaire and taught her that wealth meant nothing if you didn't know how to be human. Yeah, he said finally, you've left things better. Isabella's face crumpled and she pressed her hand to her mouth, overcome. Lily hugged her without hesitation, and after a moment, Ethan put his hand on her shoulder. They stood there together, the broke single dad, the reformed billionaire, and the 10-year-old who'd taught them both about grace watching the valley turn green with spring. And in that moment, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in 8 years. Hope. Not the desperate kind, not the kind that demanded guarantees or promised happy endings, just the quiet, stubborn kind that said, tomorrow will come, we'll face it, and we'll be okay. 3 years after the accident on a December afternoon, very much like the one where it had all started, Ethan stood in his cabin making coffee. He heard the truck pull up, heard footsteps on the porch, heard the door open. Dad, Lily called, Isabella's here. In the kitchen, he called back. They came in together, Lily 13 now and taller. Isabella, her hair fully gray now and wearing jeans she'd bought at the local store in thread of designer boutiques. They'd been in town for a council meeting about the next phase of development. Coffee, Ethan offered. Please, Isabella said, but only if you let me make it. You sure? I've been practicing for 3 years. I think I've got it. He stepped aside and Isabella moved to the coffee pot with the confidence of someone who'd learned to be comfortable in ordinary spaces. She made the coffee efficiently, no wasted motion, and when it was done, she poured 3 cups. Ethan took a sip. It was good. Actually good. You've been holding out on me, he said. Isabella smiled. I wanted to surprise you. They sat at the table, the same table where they'd eaten 4 days of meals together, where Isabella had learned what it meant to just be present and talked about the town, about Lily's school, about the small restaurant Isabella was planning to open in the old resort building. And somewhere in the conversation, Ethan realized they weren't talking around anything anymore. Weren't being careful, weren't measuring every word against the weight of the past. They were just talking, like friends. You did it, he said suddenly. Isabella looked at him. Did what? You earned it. She understood what he meant. Understood that this was the thing he'd told her to earn 3 years ago, the friendship he'd said was possible if she did the work. Does that mean you forgive me? She asked quietly. Ethan thought about Sarah, about the avalanche, about 8 years of grief and anger and learning to live with loss. No, he said honestly. I don't know if I'll ever completely forgive you for what happened to Sarah, but I forgive you for being human, for making mistakes, for trying to be better. He met her eyes. And I'm grateful you survived. Grateful you're here. Grateful you became someone worth knowing. Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. That's more than I deserve. Yeah, it is. That's what grace means. Lily, who'd been listening with the solemn attention she always gave to important moments, said, Mom would have liked her, wouldn't she, Dad? Yeah, Bug, she would have. Good, because I like her too. Me too, Ethan said. And he meant it. That evening, after Isabella left and Lily went to bed, Ethan stood at the window looking out at the valley where his town was learning to live again. Snow was starting to fall, the first snow of the season, soft and gentle, and nothing like the storm that had brought Isabella into his life. He thought about that day, about finding her in the snow, about the choice he'd made to save her instead of walking away. He'd been angry then, grieved, closed off to everything except survival. But he'd chosen to save her anyway. And that choice, that one choice, had changed everything. Not fixed everything. Sarah was still gone. The 8 years of decline still happened. The pain was still real. But from that pain had come something else. Something unexpected. A town reborn. A woman transformed. A daughter who'd learned that grace meant giving people space to become better. And a man who'd learned that you could carry grief and hope at the same time that you could honor the past while building the future, that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing were the same thing. Ethan turned from the window, banked the fire for the night, and went to bed. Tomorrow would come. There would be work to do, problems to solve, life to live. But tonight he was content. Content with what he'd built. Content with who he'd become. Content with the knowledge that he'd done the best he could with what he'd been given. And in the silence of the cabin, with snow falling soft outside, Ethan Cole, who'd spent 8 years expecting nothing, fell asleep, expecting tomorrow. And that was enough. She'd had the whole world until a broke man taught her what enough really meant.